Welcome, settle in, get comfortable, close your eyes, and let me tell you the story of a boy who watched his parents die and became the world's greatest detective. The story of Bruce Wayne, who became Batman, the Dark Knight of Gotham City. And this is a tale of tragedy and determination, of a man who turned his pain into purpose, his grief into justice, his fear into a weapon against those who prey on the innocent. So let's begin. In Gotham City, this sprawling metropolis built on corruption and crime, where the wealthy live in towers above the clouds, while the desperate struggle in streets below, where organized crime runs entire neighborhoods and the police are often as corrupt as the criminals they're supposed to catch, where hope is a rare commodity and fear is the currency everyone trades in, and into this dark city, into one of its wealthiest families, a boy named Bruce Wayne was born. Bruce Wayne came into the world with every advantage. Born to Thomas and Martha Wayne, a couple who represented the best of what Gotham could be. Thomas was a surgeon and philanthropist who ran Wayne Enterprises with the goal of helping people rather than just making money, who believed that wealth came with responsibility, that those who had much should give much. And he built hospitals and funded clinics and worked to make Gotham a better place. And Martha was his equal partner, involved in charity work and social causes, fighting for the powerless, speaking up for those who had no voice. And together they were raising Bruce to understand that privilege wasn't something to be hoarded, but something to be used to help others. And young Bruce grew up loved and protected, living in Wayne Manor on the outskirts of Gotham. This massive estate, with more rooms than one family could ever use, with grounds that stretched for acres, with a butler named Alfred Pennyworth, who had served the Wayne family for years and who became as much a parent to Bruce as Thomas and Martha were, and Bruce's childhood was happy, filled with books and learning and the security of knowing he was loved. But that childhood ended on a night that would define the rest of Bruce's life, the night that everything changed, the night his parents were murdered in front of him. It was supposed to be a simple evening out. Thomas and Martha taking young Bruce to see a movie in downtown Gotham, and they went to the Monarch Theatre to see The Mark of Zorro, this adventure film about a masked hero who fought injustice. And Bruce loved it, was enthralled by this idea of someone using a secret identity to fight for what was right. But partway through the movie, Bruce got scared during a scene with bats, these creatures that terrified him, and he asked his parents to leave, and Thomas and Martha, being loving parents, agreed, and they left the theatre through a side exit into an alley, and this decision, this moment of a father and mother putting their son's comfort above their own evening's entertainment, led them into Crime Alley. And there in the darkness, a man approached them, a desperate man with a gun, and he demanded Martha's pearls, demanded Thomas's wallet, and Thomas tried to protect his family, moved to shield Martha and Bruce, and the gunman panicked and fired, and Thomas fell, and Martha screamed, and the gunman fired again, and Martha fell beside her husband, and young Bruce Wayne stood there in the alley watching his parents die, watching the blood pool beneath them, watching the life leave their eyes. And the gunman ran, disappeared into the Gotham night, and Bruce was left alone with the bodies of his parents. And he screamed for help that came too late. And in that moment, in that alley, Bruce Wayne died too, in a way. The innocent child he had been was murdered along with his parents. And what crawled out of Crime Alley was something different, someone harder, someone driven by a rage and a pain that would never fully heal. Someone who made a promise over his parents' bodies that he would wage war on crime, that he would make sure no other child ever had to watch their parents die, that he would dedicate his life to fighting the kind of evil that had taken Thomas and Martha from him. Alfred Pennyworth became Bruce's guardian, raised this traumatized boy in the vast empty halls of Wayne Manor, and Alfred tried to help Bruce grieve, tried to give him space to be a child, to heal, to process the tragedy. But Bruce couldn't, wouldn't, refused to let go of the pain because the pain was all he had left of that night, and he threw himself into preparation. Even as a child, he was training, studying, learning, driven by this obsession to become someone who could fight crime, who could protect Gotham, who could prevent what happened to him from happening to others. And Alfred watched with concern and sadness as Bruce gave up childhood, gave up normal friendships and normal experiences, and became consumed by this mission. And Alfred tried to balance supporting Bruce with trying to keep him human, tried to be father and friend and conscience to this boy who was so brilliant and so damaged. And as Bruce grew into his teenage years, the obsession only intensified. He studied criminology and forensics, learned chemistry and physics, pushed his body through rigorous physical training, and when he was old enough, he left Gotham, left Wayne Manor and Alfred behind, and travelled the world seeking out masters who could teach him what he needed to know to become the weapon he wanted to be. Bruce spent years wandering the world, and I mean really wandering, not as a wealthy tourist, but as someone seeking knowledge, wherever it could be found. He studied martial arts in Japan and China and Korea, learning dozens of fighting styles and synthesizing them into his own unique approach to combat. He trained with manhunters in Africa who taught him tracking and survival. He studied with escape artists and magicians in Europe who taught him misdirection and illusion. He learned from detectives and investigators who taught him how to read crime scenes and follow evidence. And he pushed himself to master not just one discipline, but dozens, to become not just competent, but expert in everything from computer hacking to theatrical makeup to psychology to engineering. And through all of this, he was building himself into something more than human, not superhuman in the sense of having powers, but transcending normal human limitations through sheer will and determination and endless training. And he was also running from himself in a way, running from Gotham and the memories, staying away from the city that had taken his parents. But eventually he knew he had to return, had to face Gotham, had to fulfill the promise he made in Crime Alley. Bruce returned to Gotham in his mid-20s, physically and mentally prepared to begin his war on crime. But he quickly discovered that preparation wasn't enough, because on his first night out, trying to stop a crime as just Bruce Wayne in dark clothes, he got shot, barely escaped, stumbled back to Wayne Manor bleeding and broken, and Alfred patched him up while lecturing him about throwing his life away, and Bruce sat in his father's study trying to figure out what had gone wrong, what was missing, and he realized that criminals weren't afraid of him, that a man in dark clothes was just another target, and he needed nothing else, needed to be something else, something that would strike fear into the hearts of criminals, something that would make them afraid the way he had been afraid in Crime Alley. And as he sat there contemplating his failure, a bat crashed through the window, flew into the study, and Bruce, despite his childhood fear of bats, saw it as a sign. remembered that moment in the theatre when the bats had scared him, and he thought about fear as a weapon, thought about becoming the thing that criminals would fear, and he decided he would become a bat, would use the imagery and the symbolism of the creature that had terrified him to terrorize those who preyed on the innocent. And Batman was born not just as a costume, but as an idea, the idea that a symbol could be more powerful than a man, that fear could be weaponized and used against those who trafficked in it. Creating the Batman persona required all of Bruce's resources and skills. He designed the costume to be intimidating, all black and grey, with the cape that could spread like bat wings, with pointed ears on the cowl that made him look inhuman. With technology woven into every aspect, the cape was fireproof and could stiffen to allow gliding. The suit was armoured with Kevlar and other protective materials. The cowl had lenses that let him see in darkness and filter out toxins. The gauntlets had razor-sharp fins that could be used as weapons. And he built a utility belt filled with tools and gadgets for every situation, grappling hooks and smoke pellets and cutting tools and first aid supplies and dozens of other M's. And he established his base of operations in the caves beneath Wayne Manor, these massive caverns that he had discovered as a child and that were filled with bats, the very creatures he was modelling himself after. And he turned these caves into the Bat Cave, a high-tech headquarters with computer systems and forensic labs and vehicle bays and training areas and everything he needed to wage his war on crime. And he built vehicles, starting with the Batmobile, a heavily armoured and incredibly fast car that could navigate Gotham's streets and also serve as a mobile arsenal. And he created the persona of Bruce Wayne, the playboy billionaire, the shallow rich kid who partied and dated models and seemed to care about nothing but spending his fortune. And this persona served as the perfect cover because no one would ever suspect that vapid Bruce Wayne could be the terrifying Batman. And the contrast between who Bruce pretended to be in public and who he actually was became another mask, another layer of protection for his mission. Batman's first forays into Gotham's underworld were rough. He was still learning, still figuring out how to be this symbol of fear, and he made mistakes, underestimated opponents, nearly got killed more times than Alfred cared to count, but he learned from each encounter, adapted his tactics, refined his approach, and slowly the criminals of Gotham began to whisper about the Batman, this creature that appeared in shadows, that could disappear in an instant, that seemed to know everything about their operations, that left them tied up for the police, with evidence of their crimes, and the whispers grew into legends, and the legends grew into fear. And Batman became real in the minds of Gotham's criminals, became something more than a man in a costume, became a force of nature, an avenging spirit. And this was exactly what Bruce wanted, because the more they feared Batman, the less he had to actually fight, the more effective his presence became, and he started targeting the mob families that ran Gotham, the Falcones and the Marones and the other crime syndicates that had the city in their grip, and he disrupted their operations, freed people they had enslaved, destroyed their drug shipments, turned their soldiers against them, and the mob bosses put prices on Batman's head, sent their best killers after him. But Batman was always one step ahead, always in the shadows, always gone before they could catch him. The Gotham City Police Department didn't know what to make of Batman initially. Most of the cops were corrupt on the mob's payroll, and they saw Batman as a threat to their arrangements. But there were a few good cops, principled officers, who actually wanted to clean up Gotham. And chief among them was James Gordon, a lieutenant who had transferred from Chicago and was one of the few honest cops in the entire department. And Gordon became Batman's ally, though calling it an alliance at first was generous, more like Gordon tolerating Batman because the vigilante was getting results that the police couldn't or wouldn't get, and they developed a system. Gordon would leave files about cases on the roof of Gotham Central, and Batman would investigate and leave evidence and captured criminals, and they never worked together directly at first. Maintaining this distance because Gordon was a cop and Batman was a vigilante operating outside the law, but there was mutual respect, recognition that they were both trying to save Gotham in their own ways. And over time, this professional relationship would deepen into genuine friendship, into a partnership that would be crucial to Gotham's survival through the dark days ahead. Batman's war on crime attracted attention beyond just the mob, because Gotham City had a problem that went deeper than organized crime. Gotham seemed to breed a special kind of madness. And as Batman became more prominent, as his legend grew, colorful criminals began to emerge. Villains who were as theatrical and symbolic as Batman himself, as if the city needed these extremes, these larger-than-life figures battling in its shadows. And the first of these was the Joker, a name that would become synonymous with chaos and terror. Though his origins were murky, some said he was a failed comedian who fell into a vat of chemicals and was driven insane. Others said he was always insane, and the chemicals just made it visible. But whoever he had been before, the Joker was now something unique. A nihilistic agent of chaos who committed crimes not for profit, but for the artistry of it, for the statement, for the sheer joy of destruction. And he became obsessed with Batman, saw the Dark Knight as his opposite and his equal, order versus chaos, control versus anarchy, and their battles became legendary cat and mouse games where the stakes were thousands of lives and the prize was Gotham's soul, and Batman couldn't kill the Joker, had a code against killing that he refused to break no matter how many times the Joker escaped Arkham Asylum and murdered again, and this became Batman's greatest moral challenge. The question of whether his refusal to kill the Joker made him complicit in the Joker's future crimes. And Batman wrestled with this question constantly, but never broke his rule, never crossed that line, because he knew that if he started killing, even killing someone as evil as the Joker, he would become something else, would lose the moral authority that made him different from the criminals he fought. Other villains emerged, each representing some aspect of human darkness or Gotham's particular madness. There was the Penguin, Oswald Cobblepot, a deformed crime lord who controlled much of Gotham's underworld from his nightclub, the Iceberg Lounge. There was Two-Face, Harvey Dent, who had been Gotham's crusading district attorney and Batman's ally until acid scarred half his face and broke his mind, turning him into a villain who made all decisions based on the flip of a coin. There was the Riddler, Edward Nygma, a genius who compulsively left clues and riddles because he needed to prove he was smarter than Batman. There was Poison Ivy, Pamela Isley, an eco-terrorist with the ability to control plants and immunity to all toxins. There was Mr. Freeze, Victor Freeze, a scientist whose attempt to save his dying wife left him unable to survive outside sub-zero temperatures and who committed crimes to fund his research. There was Scarecrow. Jonathan Crane, a psychologist who weaponized fear itself using hallucinogenic gases. There was Bane, who broke Batman's back and was one of the few opponents to actually defeat him in combat. There was Ra's al Ghul, an immortal eco-terrorist who saw Batman as a potential heir and wanted to destroy Gotham as a cancer on the world. There was Catwoman, Selina Kyle, a cat burglar who walked the line between villain and ally and who became one of the few people who truly understood Bruce Wayne beneath the mask, and there were dozens more, an entire rogues gallery of broken and dangerous people who seemed drawn to Gotham and to Batman like moths to a flame. Batman couldn't fight this war alone forever, despite his preference for working solo, and gradually he found himself with allies, with a family, even though he resisted calling it that. The first and most important was Robin, though there would eventually be several people to hold that title. The first was Dick Grayson, a young circus acrobat whose parents, the Flying Graysons, were murdered by mobsters in front of him, and Bruce saw himself in this angry, traumatized boy and took him in, and Alfred pointed out that Bruce was probably the worst person to raise a child given his own damage and obsession. But Bruce tried anyway, tried to give Dick what Alfred had given him, and Dick discovered Bruce's secret and wanted to help, wanted to fight crime and get revenge for his parents, just like Bruce had. And Bruce initially refused, but eventually relented, trained Dick, gave him a costume, and Robin was born, the boy wonder. And Dick brought something to Batman's crusade that had been missing: lightness, hope, a reminder that they were fighting for something, not just against something, and the dynamic duo became Gotham's protectors, Batman the Dark Knight and Robin the Bright Squire, and they saved the city again and again. And Dick eventually grew up and became his own hero, Nightwing, establishing himself as a hero in his own right. And Bruce took in other Robins over the years: Jason Todd, who was killed by the Joker and later resurrected as the vengeful Red Hood; Tim Drake, who figured out Batman's identity through detective work and basically insisted on being Robin; Damian Wayne, who was Bruce's biological son with Talia al Ghul, though Bruce didn't know about him for years, and others. And there was Batgirl, Barbara Gordon, Jim Gordon's daughter, who became a hero in her own right and later became Oracle after the Joker shot and paralyzed her, providing intelligence and computer support to all of Gotham's heroes. And there was Alfred always, the faithful butler who patched Bruce's wounds and provided counsel and served as the emotional anchor that kept Bruce from disappearing entirely into the Batman persona. And this family, the Bat Family, as they became known, gave Bruce something he thought he'd lost in Crime Alley, gave him people to care about and people who cared about him. And it made him stronger and more vulnerable at the same time, because now he had something to lose again, had people the Joker or other villains could target to hurt him. Bruce Wayne's public life became more complicated as Batman's legend grew, because Bruce needed to maintain the illusion of being a shallow playboy while also running Wayne Enterprises and using its resources to help Gotham, and he walked this tightrope constantly, making sure his public persona was convincing while secretly funneling Wayne money into programs that would address the root causes of crime, rebuilding hospitals and schools, funding job programs and addiction treatment, trying to save Gotham from the top down as Bruce Wayne, while Batman saved it from the bottom up. And some people, like Vicky Vale, the investigative reporter, suspected Bruce might be Batman, saw through the playboy act, but they could never prove it. And Bruce used his wealth and influence to maintain the secret. And he dated occasionally, had relationships with women like Silver Street, Cloud and Julie Madison and others. But he could never fully commit because Batman was always there, always the priority, always the mission that came first, and this loneliness, this isolation, even when surrounded by his Bat family, was the price Bruce paid for his crusade. And he told himself it was worth it. Told himself that his parents' deaths had to mean something, that their sacrifice had to be honoured. But there were nights when he wondered if Thomas and Martha would have wanted this for him, if they would have wanted their son to give up any chance at normal happiness, to wage an endless war. But he couldn't stop. The mission had consumed him so completely that he didn't know who Bruce Wayne would be without Batman. The mission expanded beyond Gotham when Bruce was invited to join the Justice League, this team of superheroes that included Superman and Wonder Woman and the Flash and Green Lantern and Aquaman and others, heroes with actual superpowers who could fly and move faster than light and lift impossible weights. And Bruce was just a human, just a man in a suit. But the other heroes recognized that Batman brought something they needed: strategic thinking and detective skills, and a willingness to prepare for every contingency, including scenarios where the League's own members went rogue and Batman became the team's strategist and planner, the one who kept files on how to neutralize every League member if they were ever compromised or controlled. And this paranoia caused friction, especially when the files were stolen and used against them. But the League even truly understood that Batman's caution came from caring too much rather than too little, from having lost so much that he prepared obsessively to prevent further loss. And Superman became Bruce's closest friend among the League. Despite them being opposites in many ways, Superman was hope and light. Where Batman was fear and darkness, Superman believed in the best of humanity. Where Batman had seen the worst, Superman had grown up loved and supported. Where Bruce had grown up traumatized and alone. But they respected each other and recognized that they needed each other. That Superman needed Batman to keep him grounded, and Batman needed Superman to remind him what they were fighting for. And together, they saved the world repeatedly, facing threats from alien invasions to parallel dimensions to gods and demons. And Batman proved again and again that preparation and intelligence and will could triumph over raw power, that the human in the Batsuit could stand beside gods and hold his own. Batman faced death many times, was beaten and broken and poisoned and shot and stabbed, and worse, Bane broke his back and paralyzed him, and he had to rebuild himself through sheer determination and experimental surgery. The Joker put him through psychological torture that would have broken lesser minds. Ra's al Ghul tried to kill him and recruit him in equal measure, seeing Batman as worthy of being his heir, and Bruce survived all of it. Survived because giving up wasn't in his nature, because the mission was everything, because Gotham needed Batman even when Bruce Wayne wanted to rest. And here were times when Bruce did die, or seemed to die, trapped in situations where death seemed certain, and the Bat family and the Justice League mourned him, and Gotham descended into chaos without its Dark Knight. But Bruce always came back, always found a way to survive and return, because Batman was more than a man. Batman was an idea, and ideas don't die as long as someone believes in them. And Bruce believed in Batman with every fibre of his being, had built his entire life around this idea that one person could make a difference, that symbols mattered, that fighting for justice, even when justice seemed impossible, was worthwhile. And he passed this belief on to his Robins and to the other heroes who worked with him, and it became his legacy. This idea that anyone could be Batman, that the symbol was bigger than any single person. And when he got older, when his body started to fail from decades of abuse and injury, when he had to contemplate retirement and succession, he took comfort in knowing that the mission would continue, that Gotham would always have a dark night, even if eventually it wasn't him wearing the cowl. Bruce Wayne's journey as Batman was never just about punching criminals and solving cases. It was about confronting the deepest questions of morality and justice, and whether one person's crusade could truly make a difference in a city as broken as Gotham. And these questions became more urgent and more personal as the years went by, and the cost of being Batman mounted in ways both physical and psychological. And one of the darkest chapters in Batman's story came when the Joker murdered Jason Todd, the second Robin. And this wasn't just another battle or another loss. This was personal and devastating, because Jason was Bruce's son in all the ways that mattered, a boy Bruce had taken in and trained and tried to guide. And the Joker had kidnapped Jason and beaten him nearly to death with a crowbar while taunting him, and then left him in a warehouse with a bomb. And Bruce raced to save him, following the clues, doing everything right. But he was too late. The warehouse exploded with Jason inside, and Bruce pulled his son's broken body from the rubble, and something broke inside Batman that night. Something that had barely been holding together since his parents' murder. And for the first time in his career, Batman seriously considered killing the Joker, considered crossing that line he had sworn never to cross. Because what was the point of his code? What was the point of his rules? If they meant watching the Joker kill again and again. If they meant holding a dead child who had trusted Batman to protect him. And Bruce struggled with this rage and this grief, and ultimately he didn't kill the Joker. Couldn't bring himself to break his one rule even after losing Jason, and this decision would haunt him for years, would make him question everything about his mission. And when Jason later returned from the dead, resurrected by supernatural means and driven by anger that Batman hadn't avenged him, hadn't killed the Joker for what he'd done, it reopened all those wounds and forced Bruce to defend his choice, to explain why he hadn't crossed that line. And the truth was that Bruce knew if he killed the Joker, he wouldn't stop there, knew that the rage and pain inside him was so vast that once he started killing, he wouldn't be able to stop, would become the very thing he'd spent his life fighting against. And so he carried the guilt of Jason's death and the weight of that choice, carried it alongside all his other burdens, all his other ghosts. The physical toll of being Batman became undeniable as Bruce aged, his body bearing the scars of thousands of fights, his bones broken and reset so many times that Alfred lost count, his organs damaged by toxins and poisons, his muscles torn and strained beyond what any normal human could endure. And there came a time when a new villain arrived in Gotham, a man named Bane, who was brilliant and strong and who had spent his entire life preparing to break the Bat. And Bane studied Batman, learned his patterns, understood his psychology, and then he orchestrated a massive breakout at Arkham Asylum, freeing every villain Batman had ever captured. And Batman spent 3 months recapturing them one by one, exhausting himself, pushing his already damaged body past its limits. And Bane watched and waited, and when Batman was at his weakest, when he was physically and mentally depleted, Bane struck, confronted Batman in Wayne Manor itself, and they fought, and Batman lost, was beaten for one of the few times in his career by an opponent who was simply better on that day, and Bane broke Batman's back over his knee, snapped Bruce Wayne's spine, and left him paralyzed and broken, and Gotham descended into chaos without its protector, and Bruce had to watch from his bed as a new Batman, Jean-Paul Valley, took over the role and became increasingly violent and unstable, and Bruce had to rebuild himself, had to find a way to heal from an injury that should have left him permanently disabled, and he did it through experimental surgery and brutal physical therapy and sheer stubborn refusal to accept that his mission was over, and he reclaimed the mantle of Batman and defeated both Bane and the replacement Batman. But he was changed by the experience, was more aware of his mortality, more conscious that he couldn't do this forever, that eventually his body would give out and someone else would need to carry on the mission. Bruce's relationship with Selina Kyle, Catwoman, was one of the most complicated and important connections in his life. Because Selina understood Bruce in ways few others could, she knew what it was like to operate in Gotham's shadows, knew the thrill and the danger and the isolation, and she was one of the few people who knew Bruce was Batman and loved both sides of him, loved Bruce Wayne the man and Batman the symbol, and they danced around each other for years, sometimes working together, sometimes opposing each other, always with this tension and attraction that neither could fully act on because they were on opposite sides of the law. She was a thief, even if she had her own code and often targeted criminals rather than innocents. And he was dedicated to stopping all crime, even when he understood her motivations. And they saved each other's lives countless times. And there were nights on Gotham's rooftops where they would just talk, where Bruce could be honest about his fears and doubts in ways he couldn't with anyone else. And Selina would listen and understand and not try to fix him or change him, but just accept him as he was, broken and obsessed and trying his best. And there were moments when they almost had something more, almost stepped over that line into a real relationship. And at one point they were even engaged to be married, Bruce having finally decided that he could be Batman and have a personal life, that he could open himself to love and happiness without abandoning his mission. But at the altar, Selina decided she couldn't go through with it, believed that a happy Batman would be a less effective Batman, that Bruce needed his pain and his isolation to fuel his crusade, and she left him there. And Bruce was heartbroken, but part of him wondered if she was right, if happiness was something he was allowed to have, and they remained in each other's lives, remained important to each other. But that moment of almost happiness became another scar, another reminder of what Bruce had sacrificed for Batman. The question of whether Batman actually helped Gotham or made it worse was something Bruce grappled with constantly, because there was an argument that Batman's presence had escalated everything, that before there was a Batman there were just mobsters and corrupt cops. But after Batman arrived, the villains became theatrical and psychotic. The Joker and Two-Face and the others seemed to exist in response to Batman, as if Gotham needed these extreme opposing forces. And some people, including Gordon at times, wondered if Gotham would be better off without Batman. If his war on crime had created more problems than it solved, and Bruce wrestled with this guilt, this fear that his crusade was selfish, that he was indulging his trauma and calling it justice, and there were times when he considered retiring, considered whether Dick or Tim or someone else might be a better Batman, someone less damaged, someone who could be a symbol of hope rather than fear. But every time he considered stopping, Gotham would descend into chaos, would prove that it still needed Batman, that for all the questions about whether he helped or hurt, his presence was keeping the city from completely falling apart. And so he continued, carried the weight of those doubts alongside everything else, never entirely sure he was doing the right thing, but committed to doing something because inaction was unacceptable, Because watching Crime Alley happen over and over to other families was worse than any cost his crusade extracted. Gotham went through a period called No Man's Land after a massive earthquake. As stated, the city and the federal government decided Gotham was too damaged to rebuild and essentially abandoned it, cutting it off from the rest of the country, and Batman refused to leave even when Bruce Wayne was urged to focus his resources elsewhere, and he organized the remaining Gotham citizens, divided the city into territories that different members of the Bat family would protect, and they fought to maintain some semblance of order in a city that had descended into tribal chaos, with different gangs and villains controlling different neighborhoods. And this was Batman at his most essential, stripped of all the technology and resources, just a man in a suit trying to protect people who had nothing left. And he did protect them, held Gotham together through sheer will until the government finally decided to help rebuild. And the people of Gotham saw what Batman really was during No Man's Land, saw that he wasn't just someone who punched criminals, but someone who genuinely cared about the city and its people, who would stay when everyone else left, who would fight when fighting seemed pointless, and this earned Batman a level of respect and gratitude from Gotham's citizens that he'd never had before, transformed him from a scary vigilante into a hero. Though Bruce himself never felt like a hero, always felt like he was just doing what had to be done, what anyone in his position should do. Bruce's role as a father figure to his various Robins and other protégés was something he struggled with because he'd never had a model for healthy parenting after losing High. Its parents so young, Alfred had done his best, but Alfred was a butler first and had let Bruce's obsession go largely unchecked. And Bruce knew he was probably damaging these kids the same way he'd been damaged, was bringing them into a war that could kill them. And he carried enormous guilt about this, especially after Jason's death, and he tried to be better with Tim Drake, tried to give Tim more support and more of a normal life, encouraged him to maintain friendships and relationships outside of being Robin. And with Damian, his biological son, who had been raised by assassins and trained to kill, Bruce tried to teach gentler lessons, tried to show Damian that strength didn't require killing, that there were other ways to be a warrior. And Bruce's relationship with Damian was particularly complex because Damian was a mirror showing Bruce what he could have become if his anger and pain had been directed differently, if he'd been raised by Ra's al Ghul instead of Alfred, and Bruce worked to give Damian the childhood Bruce himself had lost, worked to teach him that being a Wayne meant helping people, not hurting them. And slowly, painfully, Damian began to change, began to internalize Bruce's lessons, and became not just a better Robin, but a better person. And this was perhaps Bruce's greatest success as a mentor, taking a child programmed to be an assassin and teaching him to be a hero. The Court of Owls revelation shook Batman's understanding of Gotham to its core, because Bruce had believed he knew everything about his city, had spent decades studying it, mapping it, understanding its history and its secrets, and then he discovered that there was a secret organization called the Court of Owls that had been controlling Gotham from the shadows for centuries, had been manipulating events and eliminating threats through their army of undead assassins called Talons. And this organization had existed in Gotham the entire time Bruce had been Batman, and he'd never known, never even suspected. And this was both a professional failure, a gap in his detective work that was unforgivable, and a personal betrayal, because the Court of Owls had connections to the Wayne family, had perhaps even been involved in his parents' deaths, and Batman had to face this ancient conspiracy, had to fight enemies who had been preparing for centuries while he'd been preparing for decades, and the court captured him and put him in a maze designed to break him psychologically, kept him running and fighting through an elaborate labyrinth for days without food or water, and Bruce nearly lost himself in the maze. But he survived through sheer stubbornness, escaped and declared war on the court, and with help from the Bat family, he dismantled their organization, freed their talons, and ended their control over Gotham. But the revelation that such a massive conspiracy had existed without his knowledge humbled Batman, reminded him that he didn't have all the answers, that Gotham still had secrets, even from him. Bruce Wayne's public image evolved over the years from playboy to philanthropist, as he realized that Bruce Wayne could fight for Gotham in ways Batman could. Dund could use Wayne Enterprises and the Wayne Foundation to address the systemic issues that created crime, poverty, and lack of opportunity and corruption. And he became more public with his charity work, funding programs that gave Gotham's youth alternatives to crime, that provided mental health services, that rebuilt neighborhoods, and some people criticized this as too little too late, pointed out that the Wayne family fortune had been built partly on the same systems that kept Gotham broken. But Bruce tried to do better, tried to use his privilege and resources to actually help rather than just maintain the status quo, and he worked with people like Lucius Fox, the genius inventor who ran Wayne Enterprises' Applied Sciences division and who knew Bruce was Batman and helped develop his technology. And together, they tried to make Wayne Enterprises a force for good in Gotham and the world, creating jobs and opportunities, refusing to manufacture weapons, investing in sustainable technology and medical research. And Bruce came to understand that the billionaire philanthropist persona was just as important as the Batman persona, that both were necessary to truly help Gotham, that you couldn't just punch your way to a better society, you also had to build it. The emergence of Damian as Robin brought challenges and rewards that Bruce hadn't anticipated, because Damian was his blood son, but also Ra's al Ghul's grandson, raised in the League of Assassins with a worldview completely opposed to Batman's code. And Damian was arrogant and violent and convinced that killing criminals less was more efficient than capturing them. And Bruce had to be a father in ways he'd never been before, had to set boundaries and teach lessons and somehow convince this child trained from birth to kill that there was a better way, and it wasn't easy. Damian resisted and rebelled and constantly tested Bruce's limits. But Bruce was patient in ways he hadn't been with his other Robins, perhaps because Damian was his actual son, or perhaps because Bruce had learned from his mistakes with Jason and Tim. And slowly Damian began to change, began to see that his father's code wasn't weakness but strength, that choosing not to kill when you had the power to kill was harder than simply executing your enemies. And Damian formed friendships with John Kent, Superman's son, and with the other young heroes in the Teen Titans, and these relationships helped humanize him, helped him understand connection and caring in ways the League of Assassins never taught. And when Damian died, sacrificing himself to save Gotham, Bruce was destroyed, lost his son, and blamed himself for bringing Damian into this life, for not protecting him better. And Bruce did something he'd never done before. He went to Apokolips, literally invaded a hell dimension ruled by the evil god Darkseid, to retrieve Damian's body and find a way to resurrect him. And this mission showed how far Bruce would go for his children, how the man who operated on cold logic and careful planning would throw all of that away and storm literal hell if it meant saving his son. And Bruce did bring Damien back, did resurrect him, and their relationship after that was different, was warmer. Because Damien had seen how much his father loved him, seen what Bruce would sacrifice for him, and Damien committed himself fully to being the Robin his father needed, to upholding the values Bruce had taught him. Batman's contingency plans for the Justice League members, the detailed files on how to neutralize each of them if they were compromised or went rogue, caused a major crisis when those files were stolen by Ra's al Ghul and used against the League, and Superman and Wonder Woman and the others felt betrayed that Batman had been planning how to kill them, that he'd been keeping these secrets. And Batman tried to explain that the plans existed precisely because he cared about them, because the world needed to be protected even from its heroes if those heroes were corrupted, and he pointed out that he had a plan to stop himself too, that he wasn't excluding himself from the possibility of going bad. And some of the League accepted this, understood Batman's paranoid logic, but others felt the trust had been broken, and Batman actually quit the League for a time, or was kicked out depending on who told the story, and he focused on Gotham and let the League operate without him. But eventually they realized they needed each other, needed Batman's strategic mind and contingency planning, needed his willingness to make the hard calls, and Batman needed the League to remind him that he wasn't alone, that he didn't have to carry every burden by himself. And they reconciled, and the plans remained. Uncomfortable secrets that everyone knew about, but tried not to think about too hard. The realization that Bruce Wayne might be Batman became more widespread over the years. Despite his efforts to maintain the secret, various people figured it out through detective work or deduction or simple knowing Bruce and seeing through his act. And Bruce had to deal with this in different ways. Sometimes using misdirection, having Dick Grayson appear as Batman while Bruce appeared as himself to create alibis, sometimes using memory-altering technology to make people forget, sometimes just trusting people to keep the secret because they understood why it mattered. And the secret became more complicated as the Bat family grew, because everyone close to Batman became a target. Everyone who knew his identity was leverage villains could use, and Bruce tried to protect them all, tried to keep them safe while also relying on them. And this contradiction, needing help but not wanting to endanger anyone, was classic Batman, trying to do everything himself while surrounded by people demanding to share the burden. And eventually, Bruce had to learn to trust his family, to accept that they chose this life with eyes open, that they weren't children he was corrupting, but partners who had their own reasons for fighting, their own demons they were confronting, and that by trying to protect them he was actually insulting them, suggesting they weren't capable of making their own choices. Bruce's investigation into his parents' murder never truly ended. He returned to it again and again over the years, finding new clues, new suspects, new theories, and the identity of the killer changed in his mind multiple times. Sometimes it was just Joe Chill, a random mugger who happened to be in Crime Alley that night. Sometimes it was a conspiracy involving the Court of Owls, or the mob, or even the Wah, Ayn family's business rivals. And the truth shifted, depending on which investigation Bruce trusted. But in the end, it almost didn't matter who pulled the trigger. What mattered was that Thomas and Martha Wayne died and their son became Batman. And Bruce came to understand that his parents' murder was a wound that would never fully heal, that he would carry it forever, and that was okay. That was the price of being who he was. And in some timelines, some versions of events, Bruce met Joe Chill again as an adult, confronted the man who had killed his parents, and had to decide whether to take revenge or show mercy. And Bruce always chose mercy, always let Chill live, because killing him wouldn't bring his parents back, wouldn't heal anything, would only make Bruce into the kind of person Thomas and Martha wouldn't recognize. And this restraint, this ability to face the source of his trauma and choose not to perpetuate the violence, this was Batman at his best, at his most heroic. As Bruce aged, as the years of being Batman accumulated and his body bore more and more damage, he began to seriously contemplate succession, to think about who would carry on when he couldn't anymore. And the obvious choice was Dick Grayson, the first Robin who had become Nightwing and was respected by heroes across the world, who embodied everything good about Batman without the darkness and obsession. But Dick didn't want to be Batman, had spent years establishing his own identity separate from Bruce's shadow, and forcing him into the role felt wrong. And there were other candidates. Tim Drake, who was perhaps the best detective of all the Robins. Damian, who had the training and the drive. Even Jason Todd, who had returned from death and operated as the Red Hood, with more violent methods but genuine desire to protect Gotham. And Bruce created protocols for his death, detailed instructions for how Gotham should be protected if he was gone, who should take over Wayne Enterprises, how his fortune should be distributed, and he recorded messages for each member of his family, telling them what they meant to him in ways he'd never been able to say out loud. And these preparations were morbid but necessary. Bruce accepting that he was mortal despite sometimes seeming like he wasn't, despite surviving things that should have killed him 100 times over. There were times when Bruce did die, or seemed to die, most notably when Darkseid hit him with the Omega Sanction and everyone believed Batman was dead. And Dick Grayson did take over as Batman, while Damian became his Robin. And they proved that Batman could continue without Bruce Wayne, that the symbol was bigger than any one person, but Bruce wasn't actually dead, was trapped in time and slowly working his way back to the present. And when he returned, he found Gotham had survived without him, that Dick had been a good Batman, maybe even a better Batman in some ways. More hopeful, less isolated, and Bruce had to confront the fact that he wasn't indispensable, that Batman could exist without him, and this was both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because it meant his mission would continue even after his death. Terrifying because it meant he defined himself by being Batman so completely that if someone else could do it just as well, who was Bruce Wayne, and he struggled with this identity crisis, with figuring out who he was beyond the mask. And he eventually came to understand that Batman was his purpose, but not his entire identity. That he was also a father and a friend and a son. That Alfred and Dick and his other children loved Bruce Wayne, not just Batman. And this realization, coming so late in his life, helped Bruce find some measure of peace. Bruce Wayne's greatest fear wasn't death or failure. It was becoming what he fought against, was crossing the line into villainy, and he saw how thin that line was, saw it in people like Harvey Dent, who had been heroes before trauma broke them, saw it in Jason Todd, who killed criminals with the same determination Bruce used to capture them, saw it in the various evil Batmen from alternate timelines or parallel dimensions who had crossed that line and become dictators or murderers. and Bruce was constantly vigilant against his own darkness, constantly checking himself, relying on Alfred and Dick and the others to pull him back when he went too far, and there were times when he did go too far, when his anger or his pain drove him to nearly kill someone, to use methods that were more about revenge than justice. And he hated himself for those moments, saw them as failures, and he worked constantly to be better, to live up to the example his parents had set, to be someone Thomas and Martha would be proud of. And this striving, this constant effort to be better than his worst impulses, this was what made Batman a hero rather than just a vigilante. The question of whether Gotham could ever truly be saved, whether Batman's crusade could ever actually end, haunted Bruce, because for every villain he put in Arkham Asylum, another escaped or a new one emerged. For every crime he stopped, 10 more happened elsewhere. For every life he saved, others were lost, and the cycle seemed endless. Seemed like he was bailing out the ocean with a teaspoon. But Bruce kept fighting because the alternative was accepting that Gotham was doomed, was giving up on the city and its people, and he couldn't do that, couldn't let Gotham fall into darkness without fighting for every soul, every street, every chance at redemption. And he pointed to the people he had saved as proof that it mattered, pointed to the kids in the programs the Wayne Foundation funded, who went to college instead of joining gangs, pointed to families who still had parents because Batman had been there on the right night, pointed to his Robins who had been angry, traumatized kids and became heroes. And these individual victories, these small moments of light pushed back against the darkness, were what kept Bruce going, what gave his crusade meaning, even when the larger war seemed unwinnable. Batman's relationship with Superman remained one of the most important in his life because Clark Kent was everything Bruce wasn't, hopeful where Bruce was cynical, trusting where Bruce was paranoid, powered by the sun, while Bruce operated in darkness. And yet, they understood each other in fundamental ways. Both orphans from dead worlds in a sense, Bruce's world of innocence and family dying in Crime Alley just as surely as Krypton exploded, both dedicated to protecting Earth and its people, both bearing the weight of enormous responsibility, and they challenged each other, Bruce keeping Clark grounded and realistic, Clark keeping Bruce from losing his humanity, and they had a friendship that transcended their differences, a bond forged through countless battles and saved worlds. And when one of them was lost or needed help, the other would move heaven and earth to save them. And this friendship between the Dark Knight and the Man of Steel became legendary, a symbol of how different people with different methods could work together toward common goals, could respect and care for each other despite approaching everything from opposite directions. As Bruce got older, into his 40s and 50s and beyond, depending on the timeline, his body began to fail in ways he couldn't simply will past anymore. Old injuries that never healed properly, arthritis from thousands of impacts, his reflexes slowing by fractions of seconds that could mean the difference between life and death in combat, and he had to adapt, rely more on technology and strategy than physical prowess. He suits capabilities to compensate for his declining abilities, and he trained harder, pushed himself even further, trying to maintain what he was losing to age. And Alfred would watch with concern as Bruce destroyed himself trying to stay Batman, trying to maintain this impossible standard, and there were conversations about retirement, about Bruce accepting that he'd done enough, that he could train someone to replace him and actually live the rest of his life, maybe travel with Selina, maybe be a full-time mentor to Damian. maybe finally grieve properly for his parents instead of converting that grief into endless crusading. But Bruce couldn't stop. The mission had consumed him so completely that he didn't know how to exist without it. Batman was who he was, and without Batman he was just a traumatized orphan who never grew past that night in Crime Alley. And so he continued, older and slower, but more experienced, more strategic, using his mind when his body failed him. Bruce's impact on Gotham extended beyond his direct actions as Batman, because his example inspired others, inspired ordinary people to stand up to crime, inspired cops like Renee Montoya and Harvey Bullock to fight corruption in the GCPD, inspired vigilantes like the Huntress and Azrael to protect their corners of the city, inspired an entire generation of young heroes who looked at Batman and thought that they too could make a difference. And Gotham slowly changed, slowly became less the city of fear it had been when Bruce first returned from his training. The mob's power was broken. The GCPD was more honest than corrupt. There were neighborhoods where people felt safe, and Bruce could see the progress even if he couldn't let himself celebrate it, couldn't let himself believe the job was done, because Gotham was always one crisis away from falling back into darkness, always needed Batman watching over it. And this Sisyphean aspect of his crusade, pushing the boulder up the hill knowing it would roll back down, this was Bruce's burden and his purpose. And he carried it without complaint, because someone had to, because Gotham needed a guardian, and if it meant sacrificing everything, his body, his chance at happiness, his very identity, then that was the price he'd pay. The Bat family became Bruce's true family, more real than any biological connection could be. Alfred, who had been mother and father and friend and conscience for decades, Dick, who had been son and partner and eventually friend and equal, Barbara, who brought intelligence and heart and reminded Bruce that heroes could be broken and still heroic, Jason, who challenged Bruce's methods and forced him to examine his rules, Tim, who proved that you didn't need tragedy to be a hero, you could choose it rationally, Damien, who showed Bruce that people could change and that his own capacity for fatherhood was greater than he believed, and all the others, Cassandra and Stephanie and Duke and Harper and so many others who had worn the colours and fought beside the Bat, and they gathered at Wayne Manor for holidays and team-ups and just to check on each other. And these gatherings were chaotic and loud, full of arguments and laughter, and the kind of comfortable familiarity that only comes from trusting people with your life repeatedly. And Bruce would sit at the head of the table, usually quiet, watching his family interact, and feel something he rarely let himself feel: contentment. Not happiness exactly, because Bruce didn't trust happiness, but satisfaction that he'd built something good, that these people existed and were making the world better, and that even when he was gone, they would continue. The mission would continue. Gotham would have protectors. In the end, Bruce Wayne's story as Batman was about transformation, about taking trauma and turning it into purpose, about choosing every day to fight for something better, even when better seemed impossible, about being broken and staying broken but not letting that brokenness define you, about standing in the darkness so others could live in the light. And his legacy wasn't the criminals he caught or the villains he defeated. It was the people he inspired, the kids who became heroes, the city that learned to hope again. The idea that one person could make a difference if they were willing to pay the price. And Bruce had paid that price 1,000 times over, had given up everything for Gotham, and whether that was heroic or tragic or both depended on how you looked at it. But it was undeniably meaningful, undeniably important. And when Bruce finally hung up the cowl, whether through death or retirement or simply passing it on, Gotham would remember, would tell stories about the Dark Knight who had protected them, would see the bat signal in the sky and feel safe knowing someone was watching. And Bruce Wayne, the boy who watched his parents die and swore to make meaning from that tragedy, would finally rest, would finally let go of the mission that had defined him, and perhaps in that rest he would find Thomas and Martha waiting, would hear them say they were proud of him, not for becoming Batman, but for staying human despite everything, for loving despite his fear, for building a family despite his trauma, for being Bruce Wayne the man even while being Batman the symbol. And he would close his eyes and sleep, truly sleep, for the first time since that night in Crime Alley. The mission complete, Gotham safe, the boy finally at peace. And the legend of Batman would continue, would echo through generations, would inspire heroes for as long as Gotham stood, because Batman was more than Bruce Wayne. Batman was an idea, and ideas never die, they only grow stronger, and Gotham would always need Batman, and someone would always answer that need, would always put on the cowl and the cape and stand against the darkness, because that's what heroes do. That's what Bruce Wayne taught them. And as you drift off to sleep thinking about the dark night of Gotham, remember that we all have the power to choose who we want to be, to take our pain and make it meaningful, to stand up when standing up is hard, to be the person someone needs us to be, just like Bruce Wayne became Batman, just like a frightened boy became the world's greatest detective, just like a broken man became a symbol of hope. And rest now, sleep well, safe in the knowledge that somewhere in the darkness, Batman is watching, protecting, never giving up, never backing down, always fighting for a better tomorrow. And that's the story of Batman, the Dark Knight, the Caped Crusader, the man who proved that anyone can be a hero if they're willing to dedicate themselves completely, who showed us that power comes not from abilities but from choices, who spent his life standing between innocent people and the evil that would harm them, and who became legend, became myth, became eternal, the Bat of Gotham, forever watching over his city, forever protecting his people, forever Batman,